I never believed in fairy tales until I lived one, and I definitely never believed they could end. My name is Amara Chen, and 6 months ago, I had $47 in my bank account, a mother dying in a county hospital, and exactly 0 options left. I was 26 years old, working 3 jobs that barely paid minimum wage, and I'd already sold everything I owned that had any value. My car, my laptop, my grandmother's wedding ring, the one thing my mom begged me not to sell. I sold it anyway. Because when someone tells you that there's a treatment that could save your mother's life, but it costs $370,000, you don't think about sentimentality. You think about numbers. Big, impossible numbers that might as well be $1 billion when you're counting coins to buy ramen noodles. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. That's what the doctors called it. 6 months to live, maybe less. But there was this experimental trial at a private research facility in Boston, cutting-edge immunotherapy that was showing real results. 30% survival rate extending to 5 years. For a disease with a 5% survival rate past 1 year, 30% felt like winning the lottery. Except the lottery cost $370,000, and my GoFundMe raised $3,400. I watched my mother get thinner every week. Watched her skin turn yellow. Watched her pretend she wasn't in pain every time I visited because she didn't want me to suffer more than I already was. This wasn't going to be a peaceful death. This was going to be brutal, clinical, and agonizing. And I couldn't do a damn thing about it. If you've ever felt completely out of options, like the universe was asking you to accept the unacceptable, drop a comment below and hit that subscribe button, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about luck, love, and the price of both. I hadn't planned on going to the Hargrave Foundation gala. The invitation came through the catering company I worked for on weekends. They needed extra servers, and overtime pay meant an extra $120. When you're counting every penny, you don't turn down overtime. The gala was held at the Metropolitan Club, one of those old money venues where the chandeliers probably cost more than most people's houses. I'd been on my feet for 6 hours already, coming straight from my morning shift at the diner, and I still had my overnight data entry job waiting for me when this ended at 11. I was in the service hallway, leaning against the wall with my eyes closed, trying to steal 30 seconds of rest before carrying out another tray of champagne flutes to people who wouldn't even look at my face when they took their drinks. "You look miserable." The voice made me jump. I opened my eyes to find a man standing a few feet away, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He was tall, probably early 30s, wearing a tuxedo that fit him the way expensive clothes do when they're custom-made. Dark hair, sharp jawline, eyes that looked grey in the dim hallway lighting. "I'm working," I said, straightening up. "I'm supposed to look professional, not happy." He smiled at that. Actually smiled, like I'd said something genuinely funny, instead of just being defensive. Fair distinction. Though in my experience the two aren't mutually exclusive. "Then you've had better jobs than me." He handed me one of the champagne glasses. I stared at it. "I'm not allowed to drink while working," I said. "You're on break," he replied. "I can see you're exhausted. 60 seconds of champagne won't get you fired." I should have refused, should have gone back to work. But there was something about the way he looked at me, not through me, the way most of the guests had all night, but actually at me, like I was a person worth talking to, that made me take the glass. 60 seconds, I agreed. "Callister Hargrave." He extended his free hand. I froze. Hargrave, as in the Hargrave Foundation, as in the family hosting this entire gala, as in billionaire tech CEO whose company had just been valued at $4 billion according to the news article I'd skimmed last week. "You're staring," he said, still holding out his hand. "You're a Hargrave," I managed. "Guilty." "And you are?" "Amara Chen." I shook his hand briefly. I should get back to work before someone sees me talking to a guest. What if I told you I specifically came looking for the miserable-looking server hiding in the hallway? Despite everything, despite the exhaustion, despite the weight of my mother's illness crushing me every second, despite having no business laughing at anything, I laughed. It came out short and surprised. Then I'd say you need better hobbies. Probably true. He leaned against the wall beside me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and understated. Why do you work 3 jobs? The question was so direct, it caught me off guard. How do you know I work 3 jobs? You said jobs, plural, earlier, and you have the look of someone running on 4 hours of sleep and pure stubbornness. I recognize it because I had it for about 5 years when I was building my company. It's not the same thing, I said quietly. No, he agreed. I chose my exhaustion. You're surviving yours. So why 3 jobs? I should have deflected, should have made an excuse and left. But maybe it was the exhaustion. Or maybe it was because he was a complete stranger I'd never see again. Or maybe it was just that I was so tired of holding everything inside. Medical bills. My mother has cancer, stage 4 pancreatic. There's a treatment that could help, but insurance won't cover experimental trials, and I need to raise $370,000 in the next few months or she dies. The words came out flat, emotionless. I'd said them so many times, to loan officers, to hospital billing departments, to the GoFundMe description I'd written and rewritten until the words lost all meaning. Callister didn't respond immediately. When I looked at him, his expression had changed. Not pity, exactly. Something more complicated. How much have you raised? He asked. $3,400. I've sold everything worth selling. My car, my laptop, jewelry. I work 19 hours a day when I can get the shifts. It's not enough. It's never going to be enough. And yet you're here, serving champagne to people who spend more on a single dinner than you make in a month. Yes. I drained the champagne glass in one long swallow. It was excellent champagne, wasted on someone too tired to appreciate it. Because I need the overtime pay. Because every dollar matters. Because I can't give up even though the math doesn't work. He studied me for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. This has my private number, he said, handing it to me. Not the office line. My actual cell phone. I took the card automatically. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, simple and expensive. I don't need charity, I said. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering you a conversation if you decide you want one. He pushed off from the wall. You're interesting, Amara Chen. Most people in there would have asked me for money within 30 seconds of learning my name. You just told me your situation and expected nothing. Because I don't expect anything from people like you, I said honestly. No offense. None taken. It's refreshing, actually. He started to walk away, then paused. For what it's worth, I hope your mother gets better, and I hope you get some sleep. Then he was gone, disappearing back into the gala, and I was left standing in the service hallway with his business card in my hand and no idea what had just happened. I slipped the card into my pocket and went back to work. By the time I got home at 2 in the morning, I'd forgotten about it, until my phone rang at 4:30 a.m. with a call from the hospital. My mother had a seizure. They'd stabilized her, but the doctor's words were blunt and brutal. Weeks, maybe days, not months anymore. The cancer was progressing faster than they'd anticipated. If I wanted to pursue the experimental treatment, it needed to happen immediately. I sat on the floor of my studio apartment as the sun came up, watching the light creep across the walls, and I thought about that business card. I'd thrown it on my desk when I got home. It was still there, half buried under medical bills and collection notices. At 8 a.m., hands shaking, I picked up my phone and dialed the number. He answered on the second ring. Callister Hargrave. This is Amara Chen, I said. From last night. You said I could call if I wanted to have a conversation. A pause. Then, I did say that. Are you free this morning? For you? Yes. Where do you want to meet? The cafe was in Brooklyn, deliberately far from anywhere Callister's usual crowd would frequent. I'd chosen it because it was neutral ground, because the coffee was decent, and because if this conversation went badly, I wanted to be somewhere I could leave without causing a scene. He arrived exactly on time, wearing jeans and a black sweater that probably cost more than my rent. He looked different outside the tuxedo, younger, more approachable, though his eyes still had that sharp intelligence that had unsettled me the night before. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I need $300,000, I said, as soon as he sat down. I'm not here to flirt or network or whatever you thought last night was about. My mother is dying, and I'm out of options, and you're the only person I've met in 5 years who has that kind of money and treated me like a human being. So I'm asking, will you help me? Most people would have recoiled, would have made excuses, would have backpedaled, would have suddenly remembered another appointment. Callister ordered a black coffee from the passing waitress, then looked at me with that same measured consideration from the night before. No, he said. The word hit me like a physical blow. I'd prepared myself for rejection, but hearing it still felt like drowning. Okay. I started to stand up. Thank you for meeting me. Sit down, Amara. I'm not finished. Something in his tone made me sink back into the chair. I won't give you $300,000, he continued, but I have a different proposal, one that benefits both of us. I don't understand. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then set it on the table between us. I saw legal documents, dense paragraphs of text I couldn't read upside down. My grandfather died 8 months ago, Callister said. He left me controlling interest in the family company, but there's a condition, a requirement actually, written into his will with ironclad legal language my lawyers say I can't break. What kind of requirement? I have to be married, not engaged, not in a relationship, legally married, before my 33rd birthday, or the company's shares revert to a trust controlled by my uncle. My birthday is in 18 months. I stared at him. That's archaic. My grandfather was an archaic man. He believed marriage made men stable, responsible, worthy of running a company. He also knew I had no interest in the society marriages my mother keeps trying to arrange. Callister leaned forward. Here's my problem. Every woman in my social circle wants to marry me for my money, my status, or both. They want the lifestyle, the access, the power. They see me as an acquisition, not a person. And you think I'm different because I'm poor? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. I think you're different because you asked me for help and expected nothing. Because you're desperate enough to be honest, and honest enough to admit you're desperate. Because you need something I can provide, and I need something you can provide. And we can help each other without the pretense of love complicating everything. He pulled up a different document on his phone. Here's what I'm offering. A contract marriage. 2 years. Your mother gets the full $300,000 for her treatment, paid up front to the medical facility. You get $10,000 a month for living expenses. At the end of 2 years, we divorce quietly, and you get a settlement of $2 million. In exchange, you play the role of my wife in public, attend the necessary events, and help me satisfy my grandfather's requirement. The numbers were so large they didn't feel real. $300,000, $10,000 a month. $2 million. Why me? I whispered, because you're real. He said it simply, like it was obvious. Because in 30 seconds of conversation last night, you were more genuine than anyone I've talked to in years. Because you're smart enough to know exactly what this is, and desperate enough to consider it anyway. The coffee arrived. Neither of us touched it. This is insane. I said, yes. You don't know anything about me. I could be a terrible person. I could take your money and humiliate you. I could... You won't. He said it with absolute certainty. You're not the type. And for what it's worth, I'm having you thoroughly vetted by my security team. But I don't think they'll find anything concerning. That's invasive. That's necessary. I'm offering you $3 million and access to my life. I'd be an idiot not to verify you're who you appear to be. Fair point. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug, needing something to hold on to. What would this marriage actually look like? I asked. Separate bedrooms, no romantic or sexual expectations unless you choose otherwise. Public appearances as needed, probably twice a month for major events. You'd move into my penthouse. There's plenty of space. We'd need to appear affectionate in public, but in private, we maintain whatever boundaries you're comfortable with. And after 2 years? Clean divorce, irreconcilable differences, no fault, already outlined in the prenup. You walk away with your settlement, no strings attached. I keep my company. We both get what we need. I thought about my mother, yellow-skinned and fragile in her hospital bed. Thought about the doctor's words. Weeks, maybe days. Thought about the experimental treatment that could give her 5 more years, maybe more. No one gets hurt in this, Callister added quietly. It's a business arrangement. We're both clear-eyed about what it is and what it isn't. People don't get married without someone getting hurt. People get married for love and get hurt. We're getting married for practical reasons. There's a difference. Was there? I wasn't sure anymore. My hands were shaking. I need time to think, I said. You don't have time. You said your mother has weeks. The treatment needs to start immediately. I need an answer today. The cruelty of it, the horrible practical truth of it, made my eyes burn. No time to grieve, no time to consider, no time for anything except impossible choices. I looked at this stranger across the table, this billionaire with his logical proposal and his expensive sweater and his sharp grey eyes. I thought about integrity, about what my mother would say if she knew, about whether saving someone's life was worth trading away 2 years of my own. Then I thought about my mother's laugh, the way she used to dance in the kitchen, the life she deserved to live. Okay, I whispered. Yes, I'll do it. Callister didn't smile, didn't celebrate, just nodded once, like we'd agreed on a business deal, which I supposed we had. My lawyer will draw up the contracts tomorrow. We'll need to move quickly. I'm thinking City Hall wedding this Friday. Small, quiet, just witnesses. Is that acceptable? Friday, 3 days away. My life changing in 3 days. Yes. He finally picked up his coffee. For what it's worth, Amara, I'll make sure your mother gets the best care available. Whatever she needs beyond the trial, pain management, comfort care, anything, it's covered. That's not in the contract. That's just me being a decent human being. For the first time since sitting down, I felt tears threaten. I blinked them back. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. My family is going to make your life hell when they find out. They're not kind people, and they're going to see you as an interloper. Are you prepared for that? I've survived worse. Maybe. He stood up, dropped 2 20s on the table for coffee that cost $8. I'll have my assistant contact you with details. And Amara, I know this seems cold and transactional, but I promise I'll treat you with respect. This might not be a real marriage, but you deserve basic human decency. He left, and I sat alone in the cafe, staring at the cooling coffee and wondering what I'd just agreed to. I called the hospital from the sidewalk outside, told them to accept the patient into the experimental trial, gave them Callister's company information for billing. Then I went home and cried for 3 hours straight, not from sadness, from relief, from terror, from the horrible, overwhelming knowledge that I'd just sold 2 years of my life to save my mother's, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Would you have taken this deal? 2 years of your life for someone you love? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. This decision is just the beginning, and what happens next will test everything Amara thinks she knows about contracts, marriage, and keeping emotions out of impossible situations. Friday came faster than I expected. I wore a cream-colored dress I'd bought from a thrift store for $30, and Callister wore a navy suit that probably cost more than my entire year's rent. We got married at City Hall with 2 of his employees as witnesses, his assistant David, and his head of security, a woman named Teresa, who gave me a look that clearly said she thought her boss had lost his mind. The ceremony took 11 minutes. The officiant seemed bored. Callister slid a platinum wedding band on my finger that felt heavy and foreign, and I did the same for him, and then we were married. Husband and wife. Contract and signature. Business arrangement in legal binding. Congratulations, the officiant said without emotion. We signed the papers. It was done. My mother started treatment the following Monday. I sat with her during the first infusion, watching the pale yellow liquid drip into her veins, and I held her hand and didn't tell her how I'd paid for it. I'd said a donor from Callister's foundation had covered it, which was technically true, and she'd cried with relief and gratitude. "You saved my life," she whispered, squeezing my hand. If only she knew what it had cost. Callister visited her every Tuesday and Thursday evening for the first month. He'd show up with flowers, always fresh peonies, which were her favorites, though I never told him that, and he'd sit and talk to her about books, about the news, about anything except business or money, or the fact that our marriage was a carefully constructed lie. She adored him, called him her son-in-law with genuine warmth, told me at least once a week how lucky I was to have found such a good man. The guilt of that nearly killed me, but slowly, week by week, she got stronger. The treatment was working. Her color improved. She gained weight. The pain lessened. By the 3rd month, she was talking about future plans, about things she wanted to do when she was well enough. And somewhere in those months, the contract between Callister and me started to shift into something I hadn't anticipated. It began small. He'd ask about my day when he came home from work. I'd ask about his meetings. We'd share dinner sometimes, sitting at opposite ends of his massive dining table, talking about nothing important. Then, the distance between us at the table started shrinking. We'd end up sitting closer, conversation flowing easier. He learned that I couldn't sleep during thunderstorms. Childhood fear, stupid and irrational, but real nonetheless. The first time a storm hit while I was living in his penthouse, I'd hidden it well, stayed in my room with headphones on, trying to drown out the thunder. The second time, he knocked on my door at 2 in the morning. "Come on," he'd said quietly. He'd taken me to his study, which was on the interior of the building. No windows, completely insulated from sound. He'd pulled up a movie on the large screen, something mindless and funny, and we'd watched it together until the storm passed. He never mentioned it again. Just did it every time after that, like it was the most natural thing in the world to rearrange his sleep schedule for someone else's irrational fear. I was in my 6th month of a graduate program I'd deferred twice because of money. When Callister found out, he'd asked why I wasn't attending classes. "Can't afford it right now," I'd said. "After the 2 years, with the settlement, I'll go back." 2 days later, he'd handed me an enrollment confirmation, paid in full. When I'd protested, he'd cut me off. "It's an investment in my wife's education, tax deductible, don't overthink it." But it wasn't about taxes. It was about him paying attention, caring, seeing me as more than just a contractual obligation. I started noticing things about him too. The way he rubbed his left temple when he was stressed, how he took his coffee black, but secretly preferred it with cream when no one was watching. The fact that he worked 16-hour days, but always made time for my mother's hospital visits. The night I realized I was falling in love with him, I was having a breakdown over a statistics assignment at 2 in the morning. I'd been crying from frustration, surrounded by papers and textbooks, convinced I was going to fail. He'd found me like that. Didn't ask questions, didn't tell me I was overreacting. Just sat down next to me on the floor and worked through the problems with me until I understood. We'd stayed there until 4 a.m., and when I finally got it, when the concepts clicked into place, I'd thrown my arms around him without thinking. He'd hugged me back, held me for just a moment too long. "You're brilliant," he'd said quietly. "Don't let a statistics class convince you otherwise." That was the moment. That was when I knew the contract had become a lie, at least for me. 3 weeks later, I returned the favor. He came home looking wrecked. A deal had fallen through, something he'd been working on for months, and I could see the weight of it in every line of his body. I didn't ask him to talk about it, just poured him a drink, sat with him in silence. Let him be human instead of the CEO everyone expected him to be. At some point, he'd leaned his head against my shoulder, just for a moment, just long enough for me to understand that he was as lonely in his world as I'd been in mine. "Thank you," he'd whispered. "For what?" "For being here. For being real." That was the night the contract became a lie for both of us. We never talked about it, never acknowledged the shift. But things changed after that. The distance we'd carefully maintained started to collapse. We'd reach for each other without thinking, his hand at the small of my back when we walked, my fingers fixing his tie before events, small touches that felt natural and right and completely against the rules we'd set. 6 months into what was supposed to be a business arrangement, I was in love with my husband. And I was terrified, because in 18 months, this ended. In 18 months, I walked away with my settlement, and he kept his company, and we both got exactly what we'd agreed to. Except I'd agreed to 2 years of pretending, and somewhere along the way, I'd stopped pretending, and I had no idea if he had too. If Callister was warm and real in private, His family was ice and calculation in public. I'd met them exactly twice before the annual Hargrave Foundation Board dinner, and both times had been exercises in subtle cruelty. His mother, Vivian, was old money personified. She wore her wealth like armor and looked at me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. She never directly insulted me. She was too well bred for that. But her questions were scalpels designed to expose exactly how much I didn't belong. "Where did you say you went to university, dear?" "State school. I worked full-time, so it took me 6 years to graduate." "How industrious," said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. His father, Jonah, was a political operator, former senator, current power broker, the kind of man who saw every interaction as a transaction. He'd assessed me in 30 seconds and dismissed me in 31. But his uncle, the man who stood to gain everything if our marriage failed, was different. He was a serpent in expensive suits, all charm and poison. "Amara, how lovely to see you again," he'd said at our second meeting, taking my hand and holding it just a moment too long. "You must tell me how you're adjusting to all this wealth. It must be quite the change from your previous circumstances." The emphasis on circumstances was deliberate, a reminder that he knew exactly where I'd come from, exactly what this marriage was. "I'm adjusting fine, thank you," I'd replied, pulling my hand back. "I'm sure you are. Young women are remarkably adaptable when properly motivated." Callister had appeared at my elbow before I could respond, his hand settling possessively on my waist. "Uncle, always a pleasure. Nephew, you look well. Marriage suits you." His smile was all teeth. "Though I confess I'm surprised you moved so quickly. Grandfather's will doesn't require haste, after all. You had 18 months. When you know, you know," Callister had replied smoothly. "Indeed. How romantic." The word romantic in his mouth sounded like an accusation. For 6 months, I'd endured this. The charity luncheons where the other women asked me invasive questions about how we met. The family dinners where Vivian seated me at the far end of the table, physically separated from Callister. The foundation meetings where his uncle questioned every opinion I offered, dismissing me as too inexperienced to understand how things work. But I'd survived it, kept my head high, my responses polite, my dignity intact. Callister had warned me they'd be difficult, and he'd been right, but I'd handled it. Until the annual Hargrave Foundation Board dinner. It was the biggest event of the year. 200 guests, major donors, business partners, political connections. A display of family power and philanthropic influence. I'd been preparing for weeks, working with Callister's stylist on the perfect dress, memorizing names and faces, studying the foundation's initiatives so I could speak intelligently about their work. The dress was emerald green silk, elegant and expensive, fitted perfectly. When I'd emerged from the bedroom that evening, Callister had stopped mid-sentence in his phone call. "I'll call you back," he'd said, hanging up without waiting for a response. His eyes had darkened as he looked at me. "You're stunning." "The dress is doing most of the work." "It's not the dress." He'd crossed the room, stopping just close enough that I could feel the heat of him. "You ready for tonight?" "As ready as I'll ever be." "They're going to try to rattle you. Probably my uncle. Don't let him get to you." "I can handle your uncle." "I know you can." He'd taken my hand, raised it to his lips, pressed a kiss to my knuckles that felt more real than performance. "But remember, you don't have to handle him alone. We're a team." Were we? In that moment, looking at him in his tuxedo, feeling his lips on my skin, I'd wanted desperately to believe it. The dinner had started smoothly enough. I'd navigated the cocktail hour successfully, made small talk with donors, laughed at appropriate moments. Callister had stayed close, his hand at my back, presenting us as the united front we were supposed to be. Dinner was served in the Foundation's main ballroom. 200 people at perfectly appointed tables. I was seated between Callister and a donor named Richard, who talked extensively about his yacht. On Callister's other side, Vivian held court, charming the table with practiced ease. We were halfway through the main course when it happened. Vivian stood, tapping her wineglass with a knife. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice carrying perfectly. As many of you know, this foundation was my father-in-law's greatest passion. He believed in family, in legacy, in the power of love to transform lives. Standard speech. I'd heard variations of it at every family event. I started to relax. Which is why tonight's announcement is particularly meaningful, Vivian continued, and something in her tone made my stomach drop. We thought we'd lost her forever. 10 years ago, a tragedy that devastated our family. But miracles do happen. The ballroom doors at the far end opened, a woman walked through them, and the entire room gasped. She was beautiful. Dark hair, delicate features, wearing a white dress that looked like it cost more than most cars. But it was the way Callister reacted that stopped my heart. He'd gone completely still beside me. His face had drained of color. He was staring at the woman like he'd seen a ghost. "Serafina," he whispered. The woman smiled, graceful and perfect, and walked directly toward our table. "Callister," she said, her voice soft and cultured. "It's been so long." Vivian beamed. 10 years ago, Serafina was taken from us. The investigation went cold. We mourned her as lost, but she's survived, she's healed, and she's come home. The room erupted in applause. I sat frozen, watching Callister stand, watching him stare at this woman like she was everything. How? He managed. "It's a long story," Serafina replied. "One I'd love to tell you. Privately, perhaps." Vivian was still talking, her voice cutting through the noise. Callister and Serafina were inseparable before the tragedy. Everyone expected them to marry. First love, true love, the kind that never really dies. The subtext was clear. I was temporary. She was eternal. His uncle stood then, raising his glass, to Serafina's return, and to Callister, who I'm sure will do the honorable thing. The honorable thing, meaning end his current marriage for his true love. Every eye in the room turned to our table. To me, the imposter wife. To Callister, torn between past and present. To Serafina, the woman who'd come back from the dead. I stood up carefully, my hands steady even though everything inside me was screaming. "Excuse me," I said quietly. I walked out of that ballroom with my head high and my dignity intact. Made it through the lobby, out the front entrance, down the steps. I didn't run, didn't cry, didn't give them the satisfaction, but inside, I was breaking, because I'd fallen in love with a man who was always going to choose someone else. And the worst part was, I had no right to be angry. We'd signed a contract. We'd agreed to terms. He'd never promised me his heart. I'd just been stupid enough to give him mine anyway. The family just played their hand, and everything Amara thought she knew is falling apart. Hit that like button if you're feeling this, and share this with someone who loves a good plot twist. Drop a comment telling me what you think Callister's going to do, because the next part is going to hurt. And don't forget to subscribe. This story is far from over. The first week after Serafina's return, I told myself I could handle it, that I was strong enough to watch Callister be kind to someone who'd survived genuine trauma without letting it destroy me. Because that was the worst part. I couldn't hate her. Not really. She'd been taken at 22, held somewhere for a decade. The details were vague, protected by therapists and family privacy, but the damage was visible. She flinched at sudden movements, couldn't handle crowds, had nightmares that left her shaking and small. And Callister, being who he was, couldn't turn away from someone suffering. The second week, he started coming home later. Not dramatically late, just an hour here, 90 minutes there, always with an explanation. Serafina had a panic attack at the foundation office. Serafina needed help finding a therapist. Serafina couldn't be alone after a particularly bad episode. "I'm sorry," he'd say, and he genuinely meant it. "She's fragile right now. The family wants me to help her adjust." "I understand," I'd reply, because what else could I say? Stop being compassionate? Abandon someone who needs help? I couldn't ask that of him without becoming someone I didn't want to be. But understanding didn't stop the hurt. The third week, the media caught wind of the story. Tragic heiress returns after decade-long disappearance ran in every major publication. Photos of Serafina looking beautiful and haunted appeared everywhere. And in those photos, often in the background, was Callister, supporting her, protecting her, looking at her with concern and something that might have been old affection. The tabloids had a field day. First love, reunited? Hargrave Ayres' complicated triangle. Who will Callister choose? As if I was even in the running, I stopped sleeping well, would lie awake listening for his key in the door, watching the clock tick past midnight, past 1 a.m., sometimes past 2. He'd slip into bed quietly, smelling like expensive hotel conference rooms and Serafina's jasmine perfume, and I'd pretend to be asleep. We stopped reaching for each other. Those small touches that had become natural. His hand at my back, my fingers fixing his collar, the casual intimacy we'd built, disappeared. Now there was space between us. Careful, deliberate distance. How's your mother doing? He'd ask over breakfast. Good. The scans came back clean again. That's wonderful. Polite, formal, like we were strangers making conversation at a dinner party. By the 4th week, Vivian had launched what I can only describe as a surgical PR campaign. Carefully placed stories about Serafina's bravery, profiles emphasizing her family connections, her education, her rightful place in their world. Photos from before the kidnapping showing her and Callister together as teenagers. Beautiful, matched, perfect. The subtext was clear. This was who belonged at his side, not the broke girl he'd married in desperation. I started spending more time at my mother's apartment, told myself I was keeping her company, helping with her recovery. Really, I was avoiding the penthouse that no longer felt like home, avoiding the ghost of what Callister and I had been before the past came back to haunt us. It was a Tuesday morning, 5 weeks after Serafina's return, when my world tilted again. I'd been feeling off for a few days, nauseous, exhausted beyond my usual graduate school tiredness, emotional in ways that felt disproportionate even given my crumbling marriage. I'd attributed it to stress, but when I threw up for the 3rd morning in a row, something made me stop at a drugstore on the way home from class. I took the test in the penthouse bathroom, sitting on the cold marble floor, hands shaking. 2 pink lines appeared almost immediately. Pregnant. I took 3 more tests, all positive. My phone told me I was approximately 3 months along. 3 months. Which meant I'd gotten pregnant around the time Callister and I stopped pretending our marriage was just business. Around the time we'd become real. I was carrying his child, and he was halfway out the door with another woman. The timing was almost funny. Almost. I sat on that bathroom floor for 2 hours. One hand pressed against my still flat stomach, trying to figure out what to do. The contract hadn't mentioned pregnancy. We'd been careful, or thought we were, but apparently not careful enough. Did I tell him? Watch obligation replace whatever feelings he'd had for me. Watch him stay because it was the right thing to do, while clearly wanting to be elsewhere. Or did I handle this quietly, the same way I'd handled everything else in my life before him? My phone buzzed. A message from Callister. Won't be home for dinner. Serafina having a difficult day. Sorry. The 9th time in 2 weeks. I deleted the message and made a decision. But before I could act on it, my phone rang again. Unknown number. Miss Chen? This is Victoria, calling on behalf of Mrs. Vivian Hargrave. She'd like to meet with you tomorrow afternoon. Are you available? My hand instinctively moved to my stomach again. Protective. What does she want to discuss? She didn't specify, simply requested a meeting at 2 p.m. at her residence. Shall I confirm your attendance? Every instinct screamed to refuse, but I'd learned something in my weeks as a Hargrave wife. Running from these people only made them chase harder. I'll be there, I said. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of the penthouse and wondered what Vivian knew. Wondered if somehow she'd already discovered the pregnancy. Wondered what new attack was coming. Because with the Hargraves, it was always something. I looked at the positive pregnancy tests lined up on the counter, looked at my reflection in the mirror. Still me, still Amara, but now carrying something precious and terrifying. I'm going to protect you, I whispered, to the life growing inside me. Whatever it takes. I just had no idea yet what that would cost. Vivian's townhouse on 5th Avenue was exactly what I'd expected. Old money, older furniture, and the kind of quiet that came from staff who knew to be invisible. The housekeeper showed me to a sitting room that probably cost more than most people's entire homes. Vivian sat in a wing-back chair like it was a throne. She wore pearls and a cream suit, and an expression of cool assessment. Callister's uncle stood by the fireplace. Of course he did. The serpent always showed up when there was killing to be done. Amara, thank you for coming. Vivian's voice was gracious, pleasant, completely at odds with the calculation in her eyes. Please, sit. I sat on the antique sofa across from her, back straight, hands folded in my lap. 3 months pregnant and facing down enemies, though they didn't know about the first part yet. I'll be direct, Vivian continued. We know about the contract. The words hit like a slap, but I kept my expression neutral. I don't know what you're talking about. Please, we've known since the beginning. City Hall wedding, rushed timeline, convenient medical expenses for your mother. My son isn't nearly as subtle as he thinks he is. She smiled, sharp and cold. We had the marriage investigated thoroughly, found the paper trail, the payments, the whole arrangement. His uncle moved from the fireplace, circling closer. 2-year contract marriage to secure his inheritance. Quite clever, really, if it had worked. It did work, I said quietly. The marriage is legal. The will's requirements are satisfied. For now. Vivian leaned forward slightly. But fraud is fraud, dear. A marriage entered into for the sole purpose of circumventing inheritance conditions can be legally invalidated. And once invalidated, all the financial transactions that stemmed from it become questionable. The threat was clear. My mother's medical bills. The money that had saved her life. You wouldn't, I said. The publicity alone would be worth it to protect this family's legacy. Vivian's voice hardened. You were a temporary solution to a temporary problem. But Serafina's return changes everything. She's the woman Callister was always meant to marry. The right breeding, the right connections, the right history. Callister makes his own choices. Does he? His uncle picked up a folder from the side table, opened it. He's a good man, my nephew, kind to a fault. Right now he's being kind to you because he feels guilty about Serafina's return. But guilt fades. First love, though, that's permanent. He pulled out photographs. Callister and Serafina as teenagers, looking at each other with young, uncomplicated affection. Callister and Serafina from 3 weeks ago, her hand on his arm, him looking concerned and tender. He's already halfway back to her, his uncle continued. It's just a matter of time before he realizes it himself. You're smart enough to see that. I was, God help me, I was. So, here's what we're offering, Vivian said. $5 million, quiet divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. You walk away with more money than you'd ever make in your lifetime. Your mother's care is permanently secured. And you get to keep your dignity instead of being publicly humiliated as the fraud who trapped a billionaire. $5 million. Enough to secure my mother's future. Enough to raise a child without ever worrying about money again. And if I refuse? I asked. We prove the marriage was fraudulent. We pursue every legal avenue available. IRS investigation into the medical payments. Questions about tax fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit inheritance fraud. His uncle's smile was poisonous. You could face criminal charges. At minimum, you'd be bankrupted by legal fees. Your mother's medical expenses would be reclaimed with interest and penalties. They had me, and they knew it. Had probably known from the beginning. Let Callister think he was being clever while they gathered evidence, waiting for the right moment to strike. And Serafina's return had given them that moment. I looked at these two people who saw human lives as chess pieces, thought about my hand pressed against my stomach this morning, about the child growing inside me that they didn't know about. If they knew about the pregnancy, they'd never let me leave. A Hargrave heir would be a weapon, a bargaining chip, a tool for manipulation. My child would be raised in this world of calculated cruelty, used as leverage against their father, taught that love was transactional. I thought about Callister's guilty looks when he mentioned Serafina, the way he'd pulled away from me week by week, the late nights that had become routine. He was already choosing her, maybe not consciously, maybe not deliberately, but the end result was the same. And if I told him about the pregnancy now, he'd stay, not because he loved me, but because he was a good man who'd never abandon his child. I'd spend the rest of my life wondering if he resented me, wondering if he looked at Serafina and thought about what might have been, watching him be kind and present and dutiful while his heart was somewhere else. My child deserved better than a father who stayed from obligation. I deserved better than a husband who chose me by default. And maybe, just maybe, Callister deserved his second chance with his first love. Deserved to find out if that relationship was real without me standing in the way. I want the agreement in writing, I said, my voice steady despite my breaking heart. Ironclad legal protection that my mother's medical expenses are never questioned, that I'm released from any and all liability related to the marriage contract, and I want the $5 million in a trust that can't be touched or reclaimed for any reason. Vivian's smile was triumphant. Of course, we'll have the papers drawn up by tomorrow. One more thing. I met her eyes. Callister doesn't know you're here. He doesn't know about this conversation. I'll tell him I'm leaving of my own choice. You let me do it my way, or I'll make this as public and messy as possible. His uncle started to object, but Vivian raised a hand. Agreed. As long as you're gone by the end of the week, you can tell him whatever story you like. I stood up, gathering the tattered remains of my dignity. I'll sign the papers as soon as they're ready. Smart girl, Vivian said. You were never going to fit in this world anyway. Better to take the money and go. I walked out of that townhouse with my head high and my heart shattered. Made it to the street before my hands started shaking. Made it 3 blocks before I had to stop, lean against a building, and fight the urge to vomit. But I didn't cry. Not there, where someone might see, where it might get back to them. I was protecting my child. I was setting Callister free. I was saving my mother from legal warfare. I was doing the right thing. So why did it feel like dying? The divorce papers arrived Thursday afternoon by courier. I signed them alone in the penthouse, sitting at the dining table where Callister and I had shared so many meals, my hand resting on the small bump that was just beginning to show. 3 months pregnant. The ultrasound I'd gotten 2 days ago had revealed something I hadn't expected. 2 heartbeats, 2 tiny forms on the grainy screen. Twins. 1 boy, 1 girl. Both currently in breech position, which the doctor said might change or might mean a surgical delivery. I'd gone to that appointment alone. Had cried in the parking lot afterward. Not from sadness, but from overwhelming love for these 2 lives I hadn't planned, but already couldn't live without. Now I was signing away their father's rights before he even knew they existed. The pen felt heavy. Each signature was an ending, a door closing, a choice I couldn't undo. When it was done, I sat for a long moment, then pulled out a piece of paper and wrote Callister a note. Not the truth, I couldn't give him that, but something he could live with. Callister, I'm leaving. Not because you did anything wrong, but because I finally understand what I should have known from the beginning. Some people aren't meant to fit in certain worlds, no matter how hard they try. You gave me the greatest gift when you saved my mother's life. I'll never stop being grateful for that. But watching you with Serafina these past weeks, I've realized something important. You deserve to explore what you might have had if tragedy hadn't intervened. You deserve the chance at the life you were supposed to live before I became a complication. I'm taking the settlement your family offered. Before you get angry, understand that I'm doing this for both of us. You'll be free to pursue your real future, and I'll have the security to build mine. It's the best outcome for everyone. Thank you for 6 months that taught me I was capable of more than I thought. Thank you for treating me with respect, even when you didn't have to. Thank you for being exactly who you are. Kind, decent, and too good to be trapped in a situation that was always temporary. I hope you find happiness with Serafina. I hope you get the love story you deserve. I hope someday you think of our time together without regret. Be well, Amara. I left the note on the kitchen counter where he'd find it. Then I packed 1 suitcase, taking only clothes I'd bought before the marriage, and a few personal items. Left behind the designer wardrobe, the jewelry, the diamonds that had never felt like mine anyway. The only thing I took that wasn't originally mine was a photograph. Candid shot from 2 months ago, Callister looking at me with an expression that had made me believe in possibilities. I slipped it into my suitcase, buried under clothes where I wouldn't see it constantly, but could find it if I needed to remember. My mother was in remission, scans clear, doctors optimistic. The $5 million would ensure she had care for the rest of her life, whatever she needed. I'd already moved her to a better apartment, set up trusts and accounts she couldn't refuse because I'd presented them as foundation charity. She'd asked about Callister yesterday. Where is he? I haven't seen him in 2 weeks. Busy with work, Mum. You know how it is. You two okay? You seem sad lately. I'm fine, just tired from school. Another lie to add to the collection. I left New York on a Friday morning. Portland, Oregon was my destination. Far enough away to truly disappear, large enough to offer opportunities, different enough from everything Callister knew that he'd never think to look for me there. The pregnancy got harder as months progressed. Twins meant twice the weight, twice the pressure, twice the exhaustion. Breech presentation for both babies meant I couldn't move as freely as I wanted in the final trimester. My doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Kim, monitored me carefully. You're doing great, she'd say at each appointment. But twins are high risk, especially breech twins. Are you sure there's no one who can be with you? Family, friends, the father? I'm sure, I'd reply. It's just me. But it wasn't just me. I was building something. The idea had come during a particularly difficult night when I'd been desperately searching for childcare options, overwhelmed by how expensive, complicated, and unreliable the system was. I'd thought, there has to be a better way. TenderTree started as a prototype app I built during my 3rd trimester. A platform connecting parents with vetted, background-checked childcare providers, transparent pricing, fair wages for caregivers, reviews, and accountability. Everything I'd wished existed when I was terrified about how I'd manage 2 babies alone. I used some of the settlement money to hire a developer who could make my clunky prototype actually functional. Started reaching out to childcare providers who were frustrated with existing platforms that undervalued them. Built relationships with parents in online forums who were desperate for better options. By the time I went into labor, I had 200 providers on the platform and 500 parents using it in the Portland area. Ivy Noel and Julian Marcus were born on a rainy March morning via scheduled surgical delivery. 2 perfect, healthy babies. When the nurses placed them in my arms for the first time, I understood for the first time in my life what people meant when they talked about love that changes everything. "Hi, babies," I'd whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I'm your mom. And I promise you, I will never let anyone make you feel like you're not enough. I will never let this world break you the way it almost broke me. You are loved. You are wanted. You are my whole world." Julian had yawned. Ivy had grabbed my finger with her tiny hand, and I'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love. The first year was brutal. Sleepless nights with 2 infants, feeding challenges, the physical recovery from surgery while caring for newborns, building a company while changing diapers and learning what each different cry meant. But I survived, more than survived. I thrived. TenderTree grew, word spread. Parents loved the transparency and reliability. Caregivers loved the fair pay and respect. 6 months after the twins were born, I secured angel investment. A year after that, venture capital funding. I was careful with my public image. Single mother by choice was how I described myself in interviews. I never mentioned the twins' father. Never posted photos of them on social media. Protected their privacy fiercely. Most media respected that boundary. And I built the company, built a life, built a future for my children that didn't depend on anyone else's money or goodwill. By the twins' 2nd birthday, TenderTree operated in 30 states. The valuation hit $200 million. I was being featured in business publications as a disruptor in the childcare industry, a mission-driven leader who understood the market because I lived it. The Series C funding round closed 3 months later. $400 million, the largest in childcare startup history. Forbes wanted to do a feature. Disruptors of traditional industries, they called it. They wanted an authentic shoot. Me at the office, at home, with the kids. "We usually keep the twins private," I told the photographer. Just background, she promised. Lifestyle shots that show who you are. Nothing exploitative. So, I agreed. They shot me in my office, wearing a blazer and jeans, sitting on the floor. Ivy was holding a tablet showing the Tender Tree app. Julian was off camera, but his laugh caught mid-frame, and I was looking at them with unguarded love. The photographer had caught something real, something I hadn't meant to reveal. The headline read, Amara Lindell, the single mother who solved childcare and built a $600 million empire doing it. The issue hit newsstands on a Thursday in September. By Friday morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Because Callister Hargrave had seen the cover, had seen the two beautiful children in the photo, had seen their eyes, distinctive pale blue eyes he recognized because he saw them in the mirror every morning. And he was coming. Callister Hargrave had spent 2 years living with regret. It had started small. The morning after Amara left, when he'd found her note on the kitchen counter and felt his world collapse, he'd called her immediately. Phone disconnected. Went to her mother's apartment. She'd moved. Neighbors didn't know where. Tried every contact he had. Nothing. She'd disappeared completely, and all he had was a note telling him to be happy with Serafina. Serafina, who'd been the beginning of his unraveling. He'd tried to be what everyone expected, to support the traumatized woman who'd returned from horror, to be kind, compassionate, present. But Serafina, after 10 years, was nothing like the girl he'd known before. That girl had been vibrant, independent, full of life. This woman was fragile, clingy, manipulative in ways he didn't want to acknowledge. His therapist, he'd started seeing one 3 months after Amara left, had been direct about it. Trauma changes people, Dr. Morrison had said. But trauma can also be weaponized. Does Serafina seek actual healing, or does she seek control through her pain? The question had haunted him, because when he looked honestly at Serafina's behavior, he saw patterns. Panic attacks that conveniently occurred when he mentioned being busy, crises that required his immediate presence, fragility that appeared and disappeared, depending on what she wanted. The breaking point came 8 months after Amara left. He'd gone to his mother's townhouse to drop off foundation documents, had been walking past the library when he'd heard Serafina on the phone. The kidnapping story worked perfectly, she'd said, laughing. They all believed it. Well, except the uncle, but he was in on it from the start. Callister had frozen in the hallway. No, I was hiding from my father's embezzlement charges, obviously. Did you really think I was kidnapped for 10 years? Please. Another laugh. I came back when the money ran out, and when I heard Callister had gotten married to some nobody. The uncle said the timing was perfect. She was clearly a fraud, easy to get rid of, and I could swoop in as the lost love. Every word was a knife. He'd walked into that library shaking with rage. Tell me I didn't just hear what I think I heard. Serafina had gone pale, ended the call, tried to backtrack. But he'd demanded the truth, and eventually she'd given it. No kidnapping, no decade of trauma, just running from consequences, burning through money in Europe, deciding to come back when she was broke and discovered he'd inherited billions. His mother had known. His uncle had known. They'd orchestrated the entire thing to break up his marriage and get rid of Amara. He'd thrown Serafina out that day, confronted his mother and uncle the same evening. The fight had been nuclear, screaming matches about family loyalty, about his grandfather's will, about Amara being unsuitable. She was real, he'd shouted at Vivian. She was the only real thing in my life, and you destroyed it. She took $5 million and ran. His mother had replied coldly. That's how real she was. He'd cut them out after that, restructured the foundation board to remove his uncle, stopped attending family events, built walls between himself and everyone with the last name Hargrave, except for a few cousins who'd proven trustworthy. And he'd searched for Amara, hired investigators, called in favors, spent obscene amounts of money trying to find a woman who clearly didn't want to be found. She'd changed her last name, back to her mother's maiden name, Lindell, which he only discovered a year into searching, moved across the country, built a completely new life. Every dead end was torture. Every failed lead felt like losing her again. He'd thought about that last morning constantly, the way she'd looked at him before he left for the office, like she'd wanted to tell him something, like she was memorizing his face. He'd been too distracted by Serafina's latest crisis to pay attention, too blind to see what was right in front of him. 6 months ago, he'd finally told the investigators to stop, accepted that Amara had taken the money his family offered, and moved on. Tried to convince himself she was happy somewhere, living the life she deserved. It hadn't worked. He still thought about her every day, still wondered what might have been if he'd been stronger, smarter, better at fighting for what mattered. Friday morning, he'd been in his office reviewing quarterly reports when his assistant brought in the mail. Standard stuff, business correspondence, industry publications, a few magazines. Forbes was on top of the stack. He'd almost ignored it, then saw the cover. The magazine slipped from his hands. Amara stared back at him from the glossy paper. She looked incredible, older, more confident, wearing success like she'd been born to it. But it was the children that stopped his heart. 2 of them, a girl holding a tablet, a boy laughing off camera, both with pale blue eyes. His eyes that were distinctive enough, unusual enough, that there was no mistaking them. He grabbed the magazine with shaking hands, read the article 3 times. Single mother by choice. Children aged 2 years. Born 3 months after Amara had left him. The math was brutal and simple. She'd been pregnant when she signed those divorce papers. Pregnant when she'd walked away. Pregnant when she'd taken his family's money and disappeared. She'd been carrying his children, and she'd never told him. The rage that filled him was unlike anything he'd experienced. Not at Amara, at himself. Because of course she hadn't told him. Why would she? He'd been spending all his time with another woman, had let his family attack her, had been too weak to fight for their marriage when it mattered. She'd probably thought he'd stay from obligation rather than love, thought she was setting him free, and she'd been raising their children alone for 2 years while he'd been wallowing in regret and self-pity. His hands shook as he pulled up his phone. Called the investigator he'd used before. Find Amara Lindell. I don't care what it costs. I need an address today. Sir, I thought you wanted us to stop. That was before I knew she had my children. Get me the address, today. He'd gotten it by noon. Portland, Oregon. Home address, office address, full background on the company she'd built. Tender tree. $600 million valuation. Featured in Forbes as an industry disruptor. She'd built an empire while raising twins alone. The twins, Ivy and Julian, his daughter and son, 2 years old, and he'd never met them. He'd stared at their photos in the magazine for hours, trying to see himself in their features, trying to understand what he'd missed, trying to figure out how to fix something this broken. One thing was certain. He wasn't letting another day pass without meeting his children, without confronting Amara, without at least trying to understand why she'd made this choice. He'd flown to Portland that evening, shown up at her office Friday morning, without calling, without warning. Because if he'd given her notice, she would have run again. When she'd walked into that lobby, looking professional and guarded and achingly familiar, it had taken everything in him not to demand answers immediately. But they'd agreed to meet at the coffee shop. Neutral ground, public enough to prevent a scene, private enough for honesty. He'd waited the 20 minutes, then walked the 2 blocks, trying to figure out what to say. How do you start a conversation with the woman who had your children and never told you? She was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table. He sat down across from her. Neither ordered coffee. How did you find me? She asked. Forbes, the cover, the children who have my eyes. Lots of children. Don't. His voice was sharper than he intended. Don't insult me by pretending. I saw them. Ivy and Julian. 2 years old, they're mine. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, yes. The confirmation, even though he'd known, hit him like a physical blow. You were pregnant when you left, he continued, needing to say it out loud. 3 months along. And you signed divorce papers and took $5 million and never said a word. Yes. Why? The question came out raw. Why would you keep my children from me? What did I do that was so terrible you'd deny me the chance to know them? Her expression finally cracked, pain showing through the professional mask. You didn't do anything terrible, she said quietly. That was the problem. You would have stayed, would have given up Serafina, would have committed to the marriage, would have been a perfect father. Does the right thing. And that's bad? It is, when your heart is somewhere else. She met his eyes. You were falling in love with her, Callister. Maybe you didn't see it, but I did. The way you looked at her, the way you prioritized her needs, the way you pulled away from me week by week. You were choosing her. Slowly maybe, but inevitably. That's not... He stopped. Because... Was she wrong? He'd been spending all his time with Serafina, had let their marriage crumble while being supportive to someone else. I made a choice, Amara continued, to let you go, to not trap you with a pregnancy you didn't plan, to raise our children somewhere they wouldn't be used as weapons in your family's wars. You should have told me. You should have given me the choice. Why? So you could do the noble thing and resent me for the rest of your life? So our children could grow up watching their father wish he was somewhere else? I wouldn't have. You would have. Maybe not consciously, maybe not deliberately, but the resentment would have come. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I loved you too much to do that to you. Loved them too much to let them be raised in that environment. He stared at her. Loved? Past tense? She looked away. This conversation isn't about my feelings. The hell it isn't. He leaned forward. You want to know what happened after you left? Serafina was never kidnapped. She was hiding from her father's crimes, living in Europe on embezzled money. When it ran out, my uncle contacted her, told her about our marriage, and they orchestrated her return together. My mother knew the whole time. Amara's eyes widened. What? I found out 8 months after you left. Heard her on the phone bragging about it. Threw her out, cut my family off, spent the last year and a half trying to find you. But you disappeared, changed your name, moved across the country, built a whole new life. I had to protect our children, I know. But Amara, you protected them from a threat that didn't exist. Yes, my family is toxic. Yes, Serafina was a lie. But I would have fought for you, for us, if you'd given me the chance. She was shaking her head. You're rewriting history. You were already gone emotionally before I left. The pregnancy just gave me permission to make it official. Maybe she was right. Maybe he had been pulling away, too weak to fight his family's pressure, too confused by Serafina's manipulation. Maybe he'd failed her first, and her leaving had just been the consequence. But that didn't change the present. I lost 2 years with my children, he said, his voice breaking. 2 years of firsts I'll never get back. First steps, first words, first birthdays. You took that from me. I know, fresh tears. And I'm sorry, truly, but I did what I thought was right at the time. Was it right, really? Or was it easier? The question hung between them. He could see her considering it, wondering. Finally she spoke. Maybe it was both. Maybe I was protecting them and protecting myself. Maybe I was a coward who ran instead of fighting. I don't know anymore, Callister. All I know is I made a choice and I can't unmake it. No, but you can make a new one. He took a breath. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking to pick up where we left off. I'm not even asking you to trust me right now. But those kids deserve to know their father, and I deserve a chance to prove I'm not the man who let you walk away. What are you asking for? Supervised visits, whatever agreement makes you comfortable. Legal framework if that helps you feel safe. But please, Amara, please don't shut me out completely. She looked at him for a long time. He could see the war in her eyes, wanting to protect, wanting to trust, wanting to believe he'd changed while terrified he hadn't. One visit, she said finally. Next weekend, 1 hour, at my house, with me present. Relief flooded through him. Okay. Conditions, she continued. You show up 1 minute late, you bring any chaos from your family. You make this about what you want instead of what they need. We're done. No second chances. Understood. And Callister? They don't know who you are yet. As far as they're concerned, you're just a visitor. I'll tell them the truth when I'm ready, not before. It hurt. but he nodded. Whatever you think is best. She stood up. The conversation was over. Saturday at 10 a.m., she said. I'll text you the address. Don't be late. Then she walked away, leaving him sitting alone in the coffee shop, trying to process everything that had just happened. He'd found her, found his children, been given a chance he didn't deserve. Now he just had to prove he was worth it. Sunday evening, 8 p.m. The twins were in bed, finally asleep after a day that had exhausted all of us. Ivy had been particularly clingy, sensing my stress even though I'd tried to hide it. Julian had been wild with energy, running himself ragged until he crashed. I was sitting in my living room reviewing quarterly reports, trying to focus on anything except the fact that Callister had found us. That next weekend I'd be introducing him to the children we'd made together. That everything was about to change. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. My nanny had left hours ago. My mother was in New York, visiting friends from her support group. I pulled up the doorbell camera on my phone. Callister stood on my porch, looking like he'd aged another year in the 3 days since I'd seen him. Every instinct screamed at me to pretend I wasn't home, to hide until he left, to protect the fragile peace I'd built. But I'd never been good at hiding from hard things. I went to the door, opened it, but not the screen door. A barrier between us, physical and symbolic. How did you find my house? I asked. Forbes mentioned Portland. The investigator did the rest. He looked exhausted. Can we talk? We talked Friday. We agreed on next weekend. This violates the boundaries we set. I know. I'm sorry, but I couldn't wait. There are things I need to say. Callister, please. The desperation in that single word made me unlock the screen door. But I didn't invite him in. Just stepped onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind me so he wouldn't wake the twins. 5 minutes, I said. He nodded, took a breath, started talking like he'd been rehearsing this. I've spent 3 days thinking about everything you said, about how I failed you, how I chose Serafina, how I let my family attack you. And you're right about all of it. I was weak. I was blind. I let the woman I loved walk away because I was too confused and guilty to fight. Callister, this doesn't change. Let me finish, please. He ran a hand through his hair. You said I would have stayed from obligation if you'd told me about the pregnancy. Maybe that's true. But Amara, the contract became real for me months before you left. I fell in love with you. Completely. And I was too scared to say it because I thought you still saw our marriage as business. My heart was pounding. You never said. I know, and that's on me. But I'm saying it now. I loved you. I love you. I've loved you for 2.5 years, and losing you broke something in me that never healed. Don't do this, I whispered. Don't rewrite what happened because you feel guilty. I'm not rewriting anything. I'm telling you the truth. I should have said 2 years ago. He took a step closer. That last morning, before everything fell apart, you looked at me like you wanted to tell me something. What was it? I remembered that morning. Remembered standing in the kitchen, one hand unconsciously on my still flat stomach, wanting desperately to tell him about the pregnancy, about the twins, about the fact that our contract had created something real and permanent. It doesn't matter now, I said. It matters to me. We stood there in the evening light, 2 people who'd loved each other and lost everything, and I felt the truth pushing its way out. I was going to tell you I was pregnant, I admitted. I was going to ask what we should do, if the contract could become real for both of us, or if we needed to end it cleanly. But then you left for the office, and Serafina called with another crisis, and I realized you'd already chosen. I chose wrong. Let me choose right this time. It's not that simple. We have children now. Their needs come before whatever we want. I know, which is why I'm not asking you to forgive me or take me back or jump into anything. I'm just asking for a chance. To be their father, to prove I've changed, to maybe eventually earn back your trust. And if you can't, if trust is too broken, then I'll accept that, but I'll still be there for Ivy and Julian. Every visit you'll allow, every moment I'm permitted. They deserve a father who shows up, even if their mother can't forgive him. I wanted to be angry, wanted to hold on to the protection that anger provided, but looking at him, genuinely devastated, genuinely trying. I just felt tired. 1 visit, I repeated. Next Saturday, 1 hour. We'll see what happens after that. Thank you. He started to leave, then turned back. Can I ask you one more question? What? Do you still love me, or is that really past tense? The question was unfair, was asking for vulnerability I wasn't ready to give, but his eyes were pleading, and I was so tired of lying. I don't know, I said honestly. I loved who we were before everything fell apart. I loved the man who sat up with me during thunderstorms and helped me through statistics and visited my mother every week. But that man let me walk away, so I don't know if I still love you, or if I just love the ghost of what we were. Fair enough. He nodded slowly. Saturday at 10 a.m. I'll be there. Don't be late. I won't. I watched him walk to his car, watched him drive away. Then I went back inside, locked the door, and slid down to the floor in the hallway. Because the truth was, I'd lied. I knew exactly how I felt. I'd never stopped loving him. Not when I signed the divorce papers. Not when I gave birth to our children. Not during 2 years of building a life without him. I loved him still, completely, devastatingly. And that terrified me more than anything else. Because love had led me to a contract marriage that became real. Love had given me 2 perfect children. And love had broken my heart so thoroughly I'd run across the country to escape it. Now love was standing on my porch, asking for a second chance, and I had no idea if I was brave enough to risk it again. I sat there until my legs went numb, until I heard Ivy call out from her room, half asleep and needing comfort, until Julian's sleepy voice joined hers. Then I got up, went to my children, and held them close. The 2 best things that had ever come from loving Callister Hargrave. Whatever happened next, I'd protect them. Give them a father if Callister proved worthy. Guard them from disappointment if he didn't. But first, I had to get through next Saturday, the day when my past and present would collide, and my carefully built world would either expand or shatter completely. Part 2. The house was silent after Callister left. Too silent. The kind of quiet The house was silent after Callister left. Too silent. The kind of quiet that amplifies every thought you're trying to avoid. I couldn't sleep. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying his words on an endless loop. I fell in love with you. Past tense. 2 years too late. Said on my porch, like a confession that might absolve him of the fact that he'd let me walk away pregnant and alone. Part of me wanted desperately to believe him. The part that remembered thunderstorms and statistics homework and the way he used to look at me like I was his entire world. The part that had fallen in love with a man who made me feel seen for the first time in my life. But another part, the part that had signed divorce papers with a 3-month baby bump, the part that had given birth alone, the part that had built an empire while he was God knows where doing God knows what. That part knew better. Knew that love without action was just pretty words. Knew that I fell in love with you meant nothing if he hadn't fought for us when it mattered. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep, walked down the hall to the twins' room, pushed open the door quietly. Ivy was curled on her side, clutching her stuffed elephant. She'd had it since birth, refused to sleep without it. Her face in sleep was peaceful, serious even in dreams. So much like her father, it made my chest ache. Julian was sprawled across his toddler bed like he'd been dropped from a height. Blankets kicked off, one arm hanging over the edge, mouth slightly open. He slept like he lived, with complete abandon, trusting the world to catch him. I sat on the floor between their beds, watching them breathe. These 2 perfect humans I'd created with a man who was now standing on my porch asking for a second chance. Your daddy wants to meet you, I whispered into the darkness. And I don't know if I'm doing the right thing by letting him. Ivy stirred slightly but didn't wake. Julian's hand twitched. Am I protecting you by being careful? Or am I punishing him for mistakes we both made? The question had no answer, just hung in the air with all the others I'd been avoiding. Because the truth is, I don't know if I can trust him. Don't know if he'll show up consistently or disappear when things get hard. Don't know if he's changed or if he's just feeling guilty. But sitting there, Looking at their faces, I knew one thing with certainty. You deserve to know where you came from. Deserve to have a father if he's willing to be one. And I can't let my fear or my heartbreak steal that from you. The weight of the upcoming decision pressed down on me. One visit next Saturday. 1 hour to see if Callister Hargrave had become the man he should have been 2 years ago. 1 hour to decide if I was brave enough to risk everything again. I stayed in their room until the sun came up, watching my children sleep, making promises to myself about boundaries and protection, and not letting history repeat itself. But deep down, beneath all the fear and anger and careful planning, there was something else. Something I didn't want to acknowledge but couldn't deny. Hope. Dangerous, foolish, utterly irrational hope that maybe, just maybe, this story didn't have to end the way it had begun. The week between Callister's porch confrontation and Saturday's scheduled visit crawled by with excruciating slowness. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like days. I threw myself into work with the kind of intensity that made my team worried. Board meetings, investor calls, a keynote speech at a childcare industry conference. Anything to keep my mind occupied. It didn't work. During the board meeting on Tuesday, I caught myself zoning out while our CFO presented quarterly financials, thinking about whether I should tell the twins who Callister was before he arrived, or let them meet him first as just a visitor. During investor calls on Wednesday, I mentally drafted and discarded a dozen different scripts. This is your father felt too heavy. This is mummy's friend felt like a lie. This is someone who wants to know you felt vague and confusing. The keynote speech Thursday went well, according to my assistant. I barely remember delivering it. Just autopiloted through talking points about disrupting traditional childcare models while my brain spun with questions. What if he charmed them immediately and they loved him? What if they rejected him and he gave up? What if this went perfectly and I had to figure out co-parenting with a man I'd loved and lost? Thursday evening, a package arrived. The courier required a signature. The box was small, professionally wrapped, with a handwritten note attached to the top. I recognized Callister's handwriting immediately. Neat, precise. The same script that had signed our marriage certificate 2.5 years ago. I brought the package inside, made myself a cup of tea I didn't drink, and finally opened the envelope. The stationery was expensive. Heavy cream paper with his initials embossed at the top. So very Callister. Amara, I know I have no right to send gifts. I know 2 years of missed birthdays and milestones can't be fixed with presents. This isn't an attempt to buy affection or fast forward through the work of earning their trust. But I wanted them to have something from me before we meet. Something that says I've been thinking about them, even though I didn't know they existed until a week ago. I'll see you Saturday. I'll be early. Callister. There were 2 small boxes inside the larger package, both wrapped in simple brown paper with names written on top in that same careful handwriting. For Ivy, on the 1st. For Julian, on the 2nd. I opened Ivy's first. Inside was a handcrafted wooden puzzle, a tree with animal pieces that fit into branches. Beautiful, age-appropriate. Clearly chosen with care rather than just expensive, because it was expensive. Julian's box held a set of board books, not random selections. Books about families that looked different, about children from all backgrounds, about blended homes and complicated stories. Each book had an inscription on the inside cover. For Ivy and Julian, may you always know you're loved, even when the story gets complicated. Dad. My hands trembled, holding those books. Dad. He'd signed them Dad like he'd earned the title. Like 2 years of absence could be erased with thoughtful gifts and pretty words. Except the gifts were thoughtful, and the gesture, while potentially manipulative, felt genuine. I hated how much that mattered. Friday evening, I sat the twins down for a conversation. As much as you can have a serious conversation with 2-year-olds whose attention span maxes out at about 90 seconds. Tomorrow, someone special is going to visit us, I said, sitting cross-legged on the playroom floor while they helped me fold laundry by unfolding everything I'd just done. Julian looked up, interested. Park? No, baby. Here at the house. Someone who wants to meet you. Ivy abandoned the shirt she was turning into a hat. Like Auntie Charisse? Charisse was my best friend from graduate school, the twins' honorary aunt. They adored her. Sort of like that. His name is Callister, but you can call him Cal if that's easier. Cal, Julian repeated, testing the sound. Calster. Big name. It is a big name. I pulled him into my lap. He's going to bring you presents, but I want you to know that presents don't mean you have to like someone. You can be polite and kind and still decide how you feel, okay? Ivy was studying me with those two perceptive eyes. Is he nice? I think so, but you can decide for yourself. Does he have toys? Of course, that was Julian's priority. He might, but more importantly, he wants to get to know you, to hear about what you like and what you're learning and what makes you happy. I like trucks, Julian announced, and cookies, and Ivy. I know, baby. And those are excellent things to like. I wanted to tell them more, wanted to explain that this man was their father, that they had his eyes and half his DNA, but they were two. They didn't need the complicated adult truth yet. They just needed to know someone new was coming, someone I was allowing into our carefully protected space. We're going to be polite and kind, I continued. Even if we're shy at first, we can take our time getting to know Cal. There's no rush. Okay, Mama, Ivy said, already losing interest and returning to her laundry destruction. Julian had found a sock and was wearing it as a glove. I watched them play, these resilient, adaptable, beautiful children who'd never known their father but were about to meet him. Wished I had their ability to just accept new information and move on. Wished I could stop obsessing over every possible outcome. But I was their mother. Worrying about outcomes was in the job description. Tomorrow, Callister would walk into our home, would meet the children he'd helped create but never known, would either prove himself worthy of their trust or confirm my worst fears about his ability to show up consistently. And I would watch it all unfold, trying to protect everyone involved while knowing that some things couldn't be protected against. Only lived through. Saturday arrived with cruel sunshine, the kind of perfect weather that made the day feel like it should be easy, uncomplicated, when everything about it was the opposite. I dressed the twins in casual clothes, jeans and t-shirts, nothing fancy. Refused to stage manage this moment like some kind of performance. If Callister was going to be part of their lives, he needed to see them as they actually were. Messy, chaotic, real. Ivy insisted on wearing mismatched socks. Julian wanted his shirt backward because he liked the tag in front. I let both happen. Pick your battles. At 9:47 a.m., my doorbell camera caught movement on the porch. Callister stood there, 13 minutes early, looking like he'd dressed and redressed 5 times before settling on jeans and a grey Henley. His hair was slightly mussed, like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked terrified. He was holding sunflowers, my favorite. He'd remembered. I opened the door before he could ring the bell and wake the twins from the precarious calm I'd managed to establish. You're early, I said. I couldn't wait anymore. I've been parked down the street since 9. He held out the flowers. These are for you. I remember you said roses were overrated and sunflowers were... Honest, I finished. You remembered. I remember everything about you. The words hung between us. I took the flowers, our fingers brushing. The electricity was still there, immediate and undeniable. I stepped back, creating space. Come in, but we need to establish ground rules before you meet them. He followed me inside, looking around the house like he was trying to memorize details. The toys scattered across the living room floor, the children's artwork taped to the refrigerator. The life I'd built without him. Ground rules, I said, setting the flowers on the kitchen counter. First, you follow my lead. If I say it's time for you to leave, you leave immediately. No arguments. Understood. Second, if the twins seem overwhelmed or uncomfortable, you back off. Their comfort matters more than your feelings. Of course. Third, no promises you can't keep. Don't tell them you'll see them next week unless you're absolutely certain you'll be here. Don't promise things you're not sure you can deliver. I won't. Fourth, you don't undermine my authority. If I tell them no about something, you support that decision. You don't get to be the fun parent who gives them everything I've said they can't have. Agreed. And fifth, I met his eyes. No discussions about our past or our relationship in front of them. Whatever issues we have, we handle them privately. They don't need to be caught in the middle of adult complications they can't understand. That's fair. Amara, thank you for this chance, for letting me... Don't thank me yet. Let's see how the next hour goes. I led him down the hall to the playroom, paused outside the door, hand on the handle. They're good kids, I said quietly. Smart, funny, resilient. They deserve consistency. If you're going to do this, you have to actually do it. Show up, be present, don't disappear when it gets hard. I won't disappear, I promise. You've made promises before. The hit landed. I saw it in his eyes, but he just nodded. You're right. So let me prove this one with actions instead of words. I opened the door. Ivy and Julian were playing with blocks on the floor, building a tower that defied physics and all reasonable expectations of structural integrity. They looked up when we entered, curious about the stranger in their playroom. Ivy spoke first, direct as always. You have my eyes. The sound Callister made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. He pressed a hand to his mouth, visibly trying to compose himself. I do, he managed. Or maybe you have mine. I'm still trying to figure that out. Julian was more cautious, staying back, assessing, always the one who needed time to warm up to new people. Callister knelt down, expensive jeans meeting a floor covered in crumbs and stickers, bringing himself to their level. Hi, he said, voice gentle. I'm Callister, but that's a big name, so you can call me Cal if you want. That is a big name, Ivy agreed. She abandoned her blocks and walked closer, studying him with the intensity of a scientist examining a new specimen. I'm Ivy. That's Julian. We're twins. I can see that. You look very similar. We have the same birthday, Ivy explained seriously. But I'm older, by 2 whole minutes. 2 minutes is a lot, Callister said, matching her serious tone. Julian was still hanging back, one hand on the block tower like he was protecting it. Is it okay if I sit down? Callister asked, directing the question to both of them but focusing on Julian. I promise I'll be careful not to knock over your tower. That looks like very important work. Julian considered this, then nodded once. Permission granted, but provisional. Callister sat cross-legged on the floor, careful to leave space between himself and the tower. Respecting Julian's boundaries, without even being told, I stood by the door, watching. This was easier than I'd expected, and harder than I'd feared. The twins, in their natural way, were just accepting this new person with curiosity, rather than fear. They didn't know what they were supposed to feel, so they felt nothing except mild interest in the stranger who'd entered their space. But Callister, watching Callister meet his children for the first time, was like watching someone find religion. Every expression they made, every word they said, seemed to hit him with the weight of revelation. Julian eventually warmed up enough to hand Callister a block. Blue, he announced. Blue, Callister agreed, holding the block like it was made of gold. That's my favorite color. What's yours? Red, like fire trucks. Fire trucks are excellent. The hour that followed was simultaneously ordinary and extraordinary. The twins asked questions with the randomness of toddlers. Why was his name so big? Did he have toys? Did he know their mom? Could he build towers too? Callister answered each one with patience and genuine engagement. Asked his own questions. What were their favorite foods? What games did they like? What were they learning about? And actually listened to the answers. He was good at this, natural in a way I hadn't expected. Got down on the floor without worrying about his clothes. Let Julian show him approximately 17 different ways to stack blocks. Admired Ivy's drawings with the seriousness they deserved. This one is you, Ivy said, pointing to a stick figure with scribbles for hair. And this is me and Julian. And this is Mama. We're at the park. This is beautiful, Callister said, and meant it. Can I keep this one? Ivy considered. Okay, but you have to put it somewhere safe. I will, I promise. The pivotal moment came about 45 minutes in. Ivy, who'd been showing Callister her book collection, suddenly climbed into his lap without warning, just settled there like it was the most natural thing in the world, opened a book, and started reading, which mostly meant making up story based on the pictures. Callister's arms came around her automatically, carefully, like he was holding something infinitely precious. His eyes met mine over her head, and I saw tears threatening. Julian, not wanting to be left out, migrated closer, didn't climb into Callister's lap, still cautious, still assessing, but sat close enough that their shoulders touched. And I stood there watching the three of them, the man I'd loved and the children we'd created, and felt my carefully constructed walls developing cracks. This was dangerous. This feeling of rightness, of pieces fitting together, of family, because family could be broken, trust could be destroyed. And I'd already survived losing Callister once. Wasn't sure I could do it again. But looking at Ivy settled comfortably against his chest, at Julian leaning into his side, at Callister's expression of wonder and pain and love, I couldn't deny them this. Couldn't let my fear rob them of a father who clearly wanted to be present. I just had to figure out how to let him in without destroying the life I'd built. At 11:02, I cleared my throat. It's been an hour. 3 pairs of eyes looked up at me. Ivy's and Julian's were confused. Callister's were pleading, "Already?" Ivy asked, "But Cal didn't see my stuffed animals yet." "Cal can see them next time, if he comes back." "Will you?" Julian asked, looking at Callister with that open toddler directness. "Come back?" "If your mom says it's okay, I would love to come back." Callister looked at me, the question in his eyes. I should have made him work harder, should have maintained more distance, should have protected myself better. Instead, I heard myself say, "How about next weekend, same time?" The relief on his face was visceral. "I'll be here." "Early again?" I asked, lips twitching despite myself. "Probably." He stood carefully, setting Ivy on her feet. "Thank you for letting me visit. This was the best hour I've had in a very long time." "We didn't even show you the fort Julian built in the closet," Ivy said, already planning next week. "I can't wait to see it next Saturday." The twins went back to their toys with the easy resilience of children who didn't understand the significance of what had just happened. Callister followed me to the door, moving slowly like he didn't want to leave. On the porch, he turned back. "Amara?" "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't say anything that will make this harder. I was just going to say thank you, and that they're incredible, and that I understand now why you protected them the way you did. They are incredible, and I will continue protecting them, which means you need to prove you're worth the risk I'm taking. I will, every day, for as long as it takes." I watched him walk to his car, watched him sit in the driver's seat for a long moment before starting the engine, watched him look back at the house once before driving away. Then I went inside, sank onto the couch, and tried to process what had just happened. The first meeting was over. It had gone well. Better than I'd feared, worse than I'd hoped, because now the possibility of this working felt real, and possibility was the most dangerous thing of all. This is just the beginning of Callister rebuilding what he lost. The journey from here gets beautiful and complicated and real. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. Drop a comment telling me if you think he deserves this second chance, because the next few weeks are going to test everything. When the hour ended, Callister stood exactly on time. Didn't ask for 5 more minutes. Didn't try to negotiate an extension. Just said goodbye to the twins with promises to see them soon, and headed for the door. I walked him out, half expecting him to push for more, to leverage the successful visit into immediate additional access. That's what the old Callister would have done. Seen an opening and pressed the advantage. Instead, he paused on the porch. "Could I come back next week? Same time? You want supervised visits?" "Indefinitely. I want whatever you're willing to give me." He met my eyes. "I'm not here to disrupt your life or make demands. I just want to know my children, on whatever terms make you comfortable." This was different. The confident CEO who'd proposed a contract marriage would have negotiated, would have outlined what he thought was fair, would have taken control of the situation. This man was asking permission, accepting boundaries, humble in a way I'd never seen him. Twice a week, I heard myself say. Wednesdays and Saturdays, 1 hour each time. We'll reassess in a month. The relief on his face was immediate. Thank you. I'll be here. He left without trying to hug me, without lingering for unnecessary conversation, without pushing for anything beyond what I'd explicitly offered. I stood on the porch watching his car disappear, wondering who this version of Callister Hargrave was, and whether I could trust him. Inside, Ivy was already playing with the wooden puzzle he'd brought, fitting animal pieces into tree branches with focused concentration. I like Cal, she announced without looking up. He's nice. I'm glad you think so. Is he going to come back? Yes, Wednesday and Saturday every week. Good. She found the elephant piece, slid it into place perfectly. He listens when I talk, not like Emma's dad who's always on his phone. Emma was her best friend from daycare. The observation was sharper than I expected from a 2-year-old, but Ivy had always been perceptive. Julian approached me quietly, holding his stuffed lion. Cal has my eyes. He does. Why? The question I'd been dreading, but Julian was looking at me with simple curiosity, not accusation or confusion, just wanting information. I sat down on the floor, pulled him into my lap. Because Cal is your daddy. He's been away for a while, but he wants to know you now. Is that okay? Julian's toddler logic processed this. Okay, can he bring more blocks next time? And just like that, it was settled in his mind. Cal was daddy. Daddy would bring blocks. The world made sense again. I wished adult emotions were that simple. The pattern established itself over the next 6 weeks. Callister arrived early for every visit. Sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 15, always punctual at departure, never pushing for extra time even when the twins begged him to stay. He brought thoughtful gifts. Art supplies for Ivy after she mentioned liking to draw. Building sets for Julian that were exactly the right complexity level for his age. Books about families that looked different. About blended homes and complicated stories. It became clear he was paying attention, not just during visits, but between them. He'd ask questions about their routines, their preferences, their development milestones. I caught him reading parenting books when he thought I wasn't looking, making notes on his phone about things they'd said or done. 3 weeks in, he asked if he could contribute to their college funds and healthcare. I don't need your money, I said immediately. I know you don't, but they're my children. Let me do this, please. We'd argued about it for 20 minutes. He'd been persistent, but not pushy. Eventually, I'd agreed to let him set up trust funds for their education and future needs. The deposits appeared 2 days later. $2 million for each twin, not in my name, not with strings attached, just accounts he couldn't touch again until they turned 18. This isn't me trying to buy my way in, he'd said when I'd called him about it. This is penance for 2 years of support I should have been providing. The twins grew more attached with each visit. Ivy drew pictures of Cal for the refrigerator. Julian asked about Daddy Cal every morning, wanting to know when he'd visit again. And Callister integrated himself into our lives with careful precision. Learned that Ivy needed her stuffed elephant to sleep. That Julian required exactly 3 bedtime stories, no more and no less. That I took my coffee with oat milk and a dangerous amount of sugar. Small details that showed he was learning us, becoming part of our routine rather than an interruption to it. I was in dangerous territory. Watching him with the children, patient and present and genuinely engaged, reminded me of why I'd fallen in love with him in the first place. The way he listened when Ivy explained her elaborate imaginary games. The way he let Julian climb on him like a jungle gym without worrying about his expensive clothes. The way he looked at them like they were the most important people in the world. And the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. Like I was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. I tried to maintain distance. Tried to remember that attraction and history didn't erase the past. That he'd let me walk away once and might do it again. But my walls were developing serious structural problems. Wednesday of week 6, Ivy asked him where he lived. In New York, he'd answered. But I'm looking at places here in Portland. so I can be closer to you. You're moving here? I'd asked after the twins went back to playing. If that's okay with you. I don't want to only see them twice a week forever, and flying back and forth isn't sustainable. I want to be where my family is. Family. He'd said it so naturally, like we were already that. That's a big decision. It's the easiest decision I've ever made. Saturday of week 6, Julian asked if Cal had a dog. No, buddy. Do you want a dog? Yes, a big one. We'll have to ask your mom about that. Dogs are a big responsibility. He'd deferred to my authority without me even being in the room. Ivy had reported the entire conversation later with great enthusiasm about potential dog acquisition. They were building a story about him in their heads. Questions about his life, his preferences, his place in their world. Not just accepting his presence, but actively wanting to know more. What story are you comfortable with them knowing? Callister had asked at the end of that visit. About us, about why we weren't together when they were born. It was a fair question, one I'd been avoiding. The truth, I said finally. Age-appropriate version, but the truth. That we loved each other, made mistakes, and now we're figuring out how to be a family. Are we? His voice was quiet. Figuring out how to be a family? I looked at this man who'd shown up twice a week for 6 weeks without fail, who'd learned my children's quirks and preferences, who'd moved his entire life across the country to be near them, who looked at me like I still mattered. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I think I want to try. The smile that broke across his face was the first genuine, unguarded joy I'd seen from him since he'd appeared in my office lobby. That's enough for me. For now, that's more than enough. 6 weeks into our twice-weekly routine, I got the flu. Not a cold, not a minor bug. The actual, violent, fever-inducing flu that turned my body into a war zone. It started Monday night. By Tuesday morning, I could barely stand. By Wednesday morning, I was shaking with chills despite a fever of 102, and the thought of getting out of bed made me want to cry. Single mothers don't get sick days. That's not how it works. The twins still needed breakfast, still needed supervision, still needed someone who wasn't actively dying. I tried to push through, got as far as the kitchen before having to sit down on the floor because the room was spinning. Ivy and Julian found me there, concerned in the way children get when their usually capable parent is suddenly fragile. "Mama sick?" Julian asked, patting my arm. "Mama's okay, baby. Just need to rest for a minute." Except I didn't need a minute. I needed about 3 days in bed and someone else to handle my life. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called Callister. He wasn't due until later, but I needed to cancel. Couldn't have him show up and find me like this. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, everything okay? We're still on for later, right? I need to cancel today." My voice sounded wrong, even to my own ears. Weak and scratchy. "Are you sick?" "Just the flu. We can reschedule for Saturday." There was a pause. "Are you alone with the twins right now?" "Yes, but I'm managing." "I'm coming over." "Callister, you don't need to." "Amara." His voice was firm. "You're sick. The twins need care. I'm their father. Let me help." I was too exhausted to argue, too miserable to care about pride or boundaries or maintaining distance. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll be there in 30 minutes." He made it in 25. I was back on the couch when he arrived, having managed to get the twins some cereal and turn on cartoons. Barely. The doorbell made my head throb. Callister let himself in. I'd texted him the door code. Carrying bags I didn't have the energy to investigate. One look at me, and his expression shifted to immediate concern. "You look terrible." "Thanks. That's exactly what every woman wants to hear." "I meant, you look really sick. Have you taken anything?" "Can't remember." He set down the bags, felt my forehead with the back of his hand. "You're burning up. When did you eat last?" "I don't know. Yesterday sometime?" He muttered something under his breath that sounded like it might have been a curse. Then he turned to the twins, who were watching him with interest. "Hey guys, your mom is sick, so I'm going to take care of all of you today. Is that okay?" "Mama's really sick," Ivy said seriously. She was on the floor earlier. I know, sweetheart, but she's going to be fine. I brought soup and medicine and everything we need. Can you help me make sure she gets better? Both twins nodded with the solemnity of children given an important mission. Callister turned back to me. You're going to bed. I've got the twins. You have work. I cleared my day. Bed. Now. I was too sick to argue. Let him help me to my room, accepted the medicine and water he brought, and collapsed into unconsciousness almost immediately. I woke hours later, fever broken but feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. The house was quiet. Too quiet for two energetic toddlers. Panic made me sit up too quickly. My head spun, but I forced myself out of bed, down the hallway, following the sound of quiet voices. Callister was in the kitchen making dinner. Real dinner. Chicken, vegetables, rice. The twins were at the table nearby, coloring quietly, somehow actually staying in the lines. You're still here, I said from the doorway. He looked up, smiled. You're awake. How do you feel? Like death, but less than before. What time is it? 6:30. You slept for about 7 hours. 7. The twins are fine. We had lunch, they napped, we had a snack, and now we're making dinner for when you feel up to eating. I stared at him. He'd kept two energetic toddlers quiet and occupied for 7 hours while I slept. Had somehow managed to actually get them to nap, which was an achievement on good days. How did you? Turns out those parenting books I've been reading actually work. He stirred something on the stove. We've had a good day, haven't we, guys? We made you a picture, Ivy announced, holding up paper covered in crayon. To help you feel better. Daddy Cal said you're not dying, Julian added helpfully, even though you look dead. Julian, Callister said gently, remember, we talked about nice ways to say things. Sorry, you look sick, but not dead. Much better, I managed, fighting back inappropriate laughter. Callister plated food, sent the twins to wash hands, and brought me soup with crackers. You don't have to do this, I said quietly. I know. I want to. He sat down across from me. You've been handling everything alone for 2 years. Let me help for one day. After the twins were in bed, another miracle because Callister somehow managed their entire bedtime routine without incident, he didn't leave immediately. I was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, feeling weak but human again. He sat in the armchair, maintaining careful distance but not disappearing. Can I ask you something? He said after a long silence. Depends on the question. Why didn't you tell me about the pregnancy? I'd known this conversation was coming eventually, had prepared answers, practiced deflections, but sitting there, still sick and exhausted, I didn't have the energy for anything except honesty. I've been trying to figure that out for months, he continued. It doesn't make sense. You built a $300 million company. You're brilliant, capable, strong. It wasn't about money or capability, so I need to understand. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself. Because you looked at her the way you used to look at me. What? Serafina, at that dinner, at every event after, you looked at her with history, recognition, possibility, and I realized I'd been a placeholder all along. Convenient, temporary, filling space until your real life came back. Amara, that's not... I was pregnant with your children while your family called me fraudulent, while your mother offered me money to disappear, while you spent every evening with another woman. My voice was steady despite the tears threatening. I watched you with her and thought maybe they're right. Maybe I was just a contract that got confused for something real. It was real. His voice was rough. Everything between us was real. Then why didn't you fight for me? The question hung between us, the one I'd been asking myself for 2 years. Callister was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. Because I'm a coward. I looked up, surprised by the blunt admission. My mother spent my entire childhood telling me I wasn't enough. Not smart enough, not strong enough, not worthy of the family legacy. Everything I achieved was because of money and privilege, not actual merit. I built a $4 billion company, and she still looked at me like I was disappointing. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. When Serafina came back, part of me believed I didn't deserve you. She was familiar, easy, family approved. You were terrifying because you made me want things I'd convinced myself I couldn't have. Real partnership, real love. Someone who saw me, not my bank account. I signed a contract for your money, I pointed out. You signed a contract to save your mother's life. You stayed because you fell in love with me. There's a difference. He met my eyes. I looked at Serafina and saw what my family wanted. I looked at you and saw what I wanted. And when I had to choose, I froze, let myself be pulled in both directions until you made the choice for me. Why didn't you fight? I asked again, because I didn't think I was worth fighting for. Losing you taught me that the only thing broken was my belief in their version of the world. What changed? Therapy. A lot of therapy. Cutting off everyone who participated in the lie. Rebuilding my company with actual values, fair wages, parental leave, diversity initiatives, all the things my grandfather would have hated. Becoming the man you deserved, instead of the one my family created. Why? I whispered. Because whether or not I ever get you back, I need to be the father our children deserve, and they deserve better than someone who lets fear make his decisions. I wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to the protection that resentment provided, but looking at him, genuinely transformed, genuinely trying, I felt my defenses weakening. They ask about you, I said quietly. Beyond the visits, Ivy wants to know where you live. Julian asks if you have a dog. They're building a story about you in their heads. What story are you comfortable with? The truth, that we loved each other and made mistakes, and now we're figuring out how to be a family. Are we? His voice was careful, hopeful. Figuring out how to be a family? I thought about him showing up early to every visit, about trust funds and parenting books and moving across the country, about today, stepping in without hesitation when I needed help. I don't know yet, I admitted. But I think I want to try. The hope that broke across his face was almost painful to witness. That's enough, he said. For now, that's more than enough. They're finding their way back to each other, piece by careful piece. But trust takes time to rebuild, and there are still obstacles ahead. Keep watching. You won't believe what happens next. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances, and share this with someone who needs to believe love can be repaired. Subscribe, so you don't miss the next part, because this family story is just getting started. 3 months into our new normal, the past arrived in the form of a black town car pulling up to my house on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the front yard with the twins, helping them plant flowers in the garden bed. Ivy was very seriously explaining to a worm why it needed to move so we could put the marigolds in its spot. Julian was mostly just digging holes and getting dirt everywhere. The car door opened, and Vivian Hargrave emerged like an avenging angel in designer clothes. I stood immediately, positioning myself between her and the children, every protective instinct firing at once. Ms. Lindell. Her voice was cold, precise. Or should I say Mrs. Hargrave? Oh wait, you divorced my son for $5 million. You need to leave. I kept my voice level, controlled. This is private property. Those children. Her eyes locked on Ivy and Julian, who'd stopped digging to watch the strange lady. They're Callisters. Not a question, a statement. They're mine. I have rights. You have nothing. The steel in my voice surprised even me. You orchestrated a fraud to destroy my marriage. You blackmailed me into signing divorce papers with threats of legal action and financial ruin. You have no moral claim, and certainly no legal one, to these children. Vivian's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, that I wasn't cowering. I could take this to court, she said. Prove you hid Callister's heirs from him. Demand custody, visitation. Go ahead. I crossed my arms. I'm worth $300 million. I can afford the best lawyers money can buy. And I have documentation of every threat you made, every manipulation, every piece of the Serafina fraud that you participated in. Come after my children, and I will bury you and your family's reputation so deep You'll never recover. We stared at each other, two women who loved the same man in completely different ways, both willing to fight to the death for what they believed was right. Finally, Vivian's shoulders dropped slightly, the aggression fading into something that looked almost like exhaustion. They deserve to know their heritage, she said quietly. They know their heritage. They're half me. I'm teaching them that family isn't about blood or money or social standing. It's about who shows up, who loves them unconditionally, who treats them like people instead of possessions. I'm their grandmother. You're a woman who tried to erase them before they were born. If you want to be in their lives, you'll have to earn it. Apologize to me for what you did. Make amends with your son. Prove through consistent action that you've changed. You don't get to show up and demand access to children you tried to prevent from existing. Vivienne was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. I thought I was protecting him. From what? A woman who loved him? Someone who saw him as a person instead of an ATM? From being used. I never used him. My voice broke slightly. I loved him. I stopped, but Vivian had heard the almost confession. Her eyes sharpened with recognition. He's been different since you left, she said. Harder, he fired half the board, cut me and his uncle off financially, rebuilt the company into something I barely recognize, employee stock options, social responsibility initiatives, parental leave policies. He said he was building something you'd be proud of. My heart clenched. I hadn't known that. Hadn't known he'd been thinking about me while making those changes. Before I could respond, Ivy tugged on my shirt. Mama, who's the lady? I knelt down to her level. This is Callister's mom, your grandmother. Ivy's eyes went wide. We have a grandma, like another one? Julian had abandoned his hole and come closer, cautious but curious. Like Grandma Renee? Renee was my mother, who the twins adored and who spoiled them shamelessly. A different grandma, I confirmed. Do you have cookies? Julian asked Vivian with the directness only a 2-year-old could pull off. Vivian actually laughed, a genuine surprised sound. I could bring some next time, if your mother says that's okay. We like chocolate chip, Julian said seriously. With the big chips, not the little ones. And they have to be soft in the middle. Those are my favorite kind too. Julian considered this, then apparently decided she passed the test. He returned to his digging. Vivian looked at them with something like wonder. They're beautiful, both of them. I know. I've made terrible mistakes. I know that too. Is there any chance I could earn my way back? Not just with the children, with you, with Callister. The old me would have said no, would have protected my hurt and my children's stability, and refused to give this woman who'd caused so much pain another opportunity. But I'd spent 2 years teaching my children about forgiveness, second chances, growth, about how people could change if they did the work, how grace was something you extended even when it wasn't deserved, because that's what made it grace. You start by apologizing to Callister, I said, really apologizing, not making excuses or justifying what you did. Own it completely. And then? Then you respect whatever boundaries he sets. You prove through actions, not words, that you've changed. And maybe, after you've put in that work, we talk about supervised visits with the twins. Thank you. Vivian's voice was thick. I don't deserve your grace. No, but they deserve grandparents who've learned from their mistakes, and I deserve to model the kind of forgiveness I want them to practice. After Vivian left, I immediately called Callister. Your mother was just here, I said when he answered. What? His voice went sharp with panic. Are you okay? The twins? We're fine. I handled it. Handled it how? Amara, if she threatened you. She didn't. Well, she tried, but I shut it down pretty effectively. I watched Ivy and Julian return to their planting completely unbothered by the encounter. She wants to make amends, starting with you. He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know if I can forgive her. You don't have to. Not today, maybe not ever. But I think she's genuinely sorry, and the twins deserve to know all their grandparents if those grandparents are willing to earn it. You're incredible. You know that? I'm practical. There's a difference. No, you're both. Another pause. I'm coming over. Callister, it's Wednesday. You're coming tomorrow anyway. I need to see you now. All of you. Just need to see that you're okay. Something in his tone made my pulse quicken. Okay, come over. Callister arrived 30 minutes later, looking like he'd run the entire way. His hair was mussed, his shirt slightly wrinkled, and there was an intensity in his eyes I hadn't seen before. The twins were eating dinner, mac and cheese with cut-up hot dogs, the height of culinary sophistication according to them. He greeted them with hugs and kisses, but his eyes kept drifting to me. After they were in bed, he found me on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose gold. I need to say something, he said without preamble, and I need you to just listen until I'm done. Can you do that? My heart was pounding, but I nodded. He took a breath. I've been trying so hard these past 3 months to be the perfect CO parent, to respect your boundaries, to not push, to earn back your trust through consistent action. And I'll keep doing that for as long as it takes. He moved closer, but still maintained careful distance. But every single day, I've wanted to tell you that I'm still in love with you, that I never stopped, that watching you with our children is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and going home to an empty house every night is killing me. My breath caught. I didn't say anything because I was terrified of scaring you off, of making you think I was only here for you and not the kids. But my mother showing up today made me realize something. He pulled a small box from his pocket. My heart stopped. This isn't the ring from our contract marriage, he said quickly. I returned my grandmother's ring. Too much Hargrave baggage attached to it. I had this made. He opened the box. Inside was a ring that took my breath away, an emerald-cut diamond with smaller stones on either side, set in rose gold. The center stone represents you, he explained. The side stones are Ivy and Julian. The rose gold is because you said once that you loved how it looked like sunset. You were eating breakfast at the penthouse, and the morning light was hitting your coffee cup, and you said rose. Gold was your favorite because it reminded you that beautiful things could be warm and real, not just cold and perfect. He'd remembered a throwaway comment from 2.5 years ago, and he'd remembered, I'm not asking you to marry me right now. He continued, I know I have more to prove, more amends to make, but I'm asking if you can see a future where we're not just co-parents, where we're partners, where we fall asleep together and wake up together and build a real life, not a contract, but a choice we make every day. Callister, let me finish, please. His voice was rough with emotion. Can you forgive me for being weak when I should have been strong, for choosing guilt over love, for missing 2 years of our children's lives because I didn't fight hard enough for us? He was crying now, tears streaming down his face. Is there any part of you that still loves me the way I love you? I stood up, moved close enough to touch him, close enough to see every emotion written across his face. You really think I built a $300 million company while raising twins just to prove a point? I asked. What? I threw myself into Tender Tree because it was the only thing that stopped me from thinking about you every second of every day. I became successful to prove I didn't need you, but the truth is, I wanted you. I cupped his face in my hands. Every milestone, every victory, every amazing moment with the twins, I wanted to share them with you. Not because I needed you, but because I wanted you there. Amara, I've been terrified to let you back in, not because I don't love you, but because I do. The tears were falling now, hot and fast. I never stopped loving you. That's the scariest thing about all of this. Loving someone who's already broken your heart once. I will never. Let me finish, I said, smiling through the tears. You've spent 3 months proving you've changed, that you're not the man who let his family manipulate him, that you're someone who shows up even when it's hard, even when you're only getting scraps of what you want. You've been patient and kind and so good with our babies. They're easy to be good to. They're half you. I kissed him then, soft and reverent and full of 2 years of longing I'd been trying to deny. He kissed me back like I was air and he'd been drowning. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, I kept my hands on his face. The question isn't whether I love you, I said. It's whether I'm brave enough to risk my heart again. And the answer is yes. Because our children deserve to see what real love looks like. And I'm tired of pretending I don't want you in my bed and my life and my future. He kissed me again, deeper this time, and it felt like coming home. Like the contract marriage had always been leading us to this moment. Not a fake arrangement, but a real one. Not obligation, but choice. I'm still not putting that ring on yet, I said when we broke apart. I know. We're going to date, like normal people. You're going to court me properly this time. I can do that. And therapy. Together. We need to deal with the past instead of just burying it. I already found a therapist. We're on the waiting list for 2 months from now. I laughed, despite myself. Very presumptuous of you. Very in love. Very committed to getting this right. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. Ask me again in 6 months. If I've put in the work, the real hard emotional work, ask me again with this ring. And if I do, then maybe I'll say yes. I kissed him again, long and deep and full of promise. Now, come inside, I said. Stay tonight. Guest room for now, because we're taking this slow. But let the twins wake up with you here in the morning. I'd like that very much. 6 months sounds like a long time. In reality, it passed in a blur of ordinary moments that built into something extraordinary. Callister went to therapy every Thursday. We went to couples counseling every Wednesday evening after the twins were asleep. He showed up for everything. School events, where Ivy presented her artwork with serious pride. Pediatrician appointments where Julian charmed the nurses. Mundane Tuesday dinners where we ate chicken nuggets and talked about our days. He was proving he wasn't going anywhere. The sleepovers became routine within weeks. Guest room. At first, true to my word about taking things slow. But there were mornings I'd wake to find him already in the kitchen making breakfast. The twins chattering away while he flipped pancakes. Evenings where he'd stay for dinner and bedtime stories. And suddenly it was 10 p.m. and leaving seemed silly. You could just move in, I said one night, about 2 months into our reconciliation. You're here most of the time anyway. Are you sure? He'd looked up from the dishwasher he was loading. I don't want to rush you. You've been here every day for 8 weeks. I think we've moved past rushing. He'd moved in the following weekend. Not into my room, not yet, but into the guest room that slowly became his space. His clothes in the closet, his toiletries in the bathroom, his presence woven into the fabric of our daily life. Vivian's redemption journey was longer and harder than a simple apology. She and Callister had their first conversation 3 weeks after she'd shown up at my house. I didn't ask what was said, but Callister had come home quiet and emotionally wrung out. She apologized, he'd said, sitting on the couch with his head in his hands. Really apologized. Not excuses, not justifications, just owned what she did and said she was sorry. How do you feel about that? I don't know. Angry still, but maybe a little less than before. It took months. Individual therapy for Vivian, family sessions with Callister, slowly, painfully rebuilding trust that had been shattered. Supervised visits with the twins, where she learned to be a grandmother instead of a matriarch. She brought the chocolate chip cookies Julian had requested, with the big chips, soft in the middle, exactly as specified. And when Ivy spilled juice all over her cream suit, Vivian had laughed instead of scolding. Small moments, but they added up. My mother was in full remission, scans clear for over a year now. She and Vivian had formed an unlikely friendship, bonding over their shared grandchildren and their mutual determination to make up for past mistakes. We were building something, a family. Not the fairy tale version where everything was easy and everyone got along perfectly, but the real version, where people made mistakes and did the work to fix them. Callister bought a house 3 blocks from ours, close enough to be present, far enough to respect boundaries. Though he spent most nights at our place anyway, the house became a symbol. Commitment to Portland. Commitment to being here. Commitment to us. At the 5-month mark, I finally let him move from the guest room to mine. It felt like a bigger step than it should have, given that we'd been married before, had children together, had lived in the same penthouse for months. But this was different. This was choice. This was me trusting him with my heart again after he'd broken it. You're sure? He'd asked the night I suggested it. I'm sure. Come to bed, Callister, the right bed this time. That night felt like a new beginning, like we were finally, truly choosing each other, without contracts or obligations or anything except love. 6 months later, we rented a house in Maine for summer vacation, a sprawling beach cottage with enough room for everyone, me, Callister, the twins, my mother, and even Vivian, who'd asked tentatively if she could join. The sunset was painting the sky in shades of rose gold, the same color as the ring I knew was still waiting in Callister's possession. The twins were building sandcastles with my mother, who spoiled her grandchildren with gleeful abandon. Vivienne sat nearby, offering advice on tower construction, still learning how to be a grandmother instead of a matriarch. Callister took my hand. So, it's been 6 months. It has. I've been going to therapy every week. We've been doing couples counseling every Wednesday. I've shown up for every school event, every pediatrician appointment, every mundane Tuesday dinner. You have. You said if I put in the work, the real hard emotional work, I could ask again. He pulled out the same ring box from 6 months ago. My heart started racing. Amara Lindell, will you marry me? Not for a contract, not for money, not for my family or any reason except that I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. Let me be your husband. Let me be Ivy and Julian's father, officially and forever. Let me help you build the most beautiful, chaotic, imperfect family that's ever existed. I looked at this man who'd broken my heart and then spent months carefully piecing it back together, who'd learned to braid Ivy's hair and build Julian's increasingly complex block towers, who showed up every single day, even when it was hard, even when I pushed him away. Yes, I said, tears streaming down my face. 1,000 times yes. The ring slid on perfectly, the rose gold catching the sunset light exactly the way he'd remembered I loved. The twins came running from their secret hiding spot behind a sand dune, because of course they'd known this was happening. Did she say yes? Ivy demanded. She said yes! Callister scooped them both up, spinning in a circle while they shrieked with laughter. Does this mean you're going to live with us now? Julian asked when Callister set them down. I already live with you, buddy. But like, forever? If that's okay with you guys. Can we get a dog? Julian's negotiation skills were developing nicely. We'll talk about it. Ivy leaned close to Julian. That means yes. My mother approached, tears streaming down her face. I'm so happy for you, baby. Even Vivienne was smiling, genuine and warm. Welcome to the family, officially this time. That night, after the twins were asleep and the house was quiet, Callister and I sat on the porch overlooking the ocean. I can't believe this is real, I said, looking at the ring on my finger. Believe it. You're stuck with me now. We should probably talk about logistics, wedding plans, paperwork. City Hall again, I said immediately. Nothing big, just us and the people who matter. Whatever you want. And I'm keeping my last name, professionally at least. I built Tender Tree as Amara Lindell. I love that you're keeping your name. You earned it. He kissed my temple. The twins can be Hargrave Lindell if you want. Best of both worlds. Perfect. I leaned against him, breathing in his familiar scent, feeling the solid warmth of him beside me. I was so angry at you for so long, I said quietly. I know, but I think we needed that time apart to become the people who could make this work. The first marriage was a contract. This one is a choice. The best choice I'll ever make. 3 weeks later, we were back at the same city hall where our contract marriage had begun. This time, Ivy was the flower girl, taking her job very seriously and inspecting every petal she dropped. Julian was the ring bearer, though he spent most of the ceremony asking loudly when we were going to eat cake. My mother cried happy tears through the entire ceremony. Vivian attended with humility and grace, no longer the ice queen but a woman genuinely trying to rebuild what she'd broken. When Callister kissed me as his wife, his real wife, chosen not contracted, he whispered, "No expiration date this time. Never. This is forever." 5 years later, Tendertree had grown beyond anything I'd imagined when I'd built that first prototype while pregnant and heartbroken. The headquarters had expanded into a full campus with on-site childcare, flexible work arrangements, and a revolutionary culture that treated parents as people first, employees second. My office overlooked the playground where Ivy and Julian, now 7 years old, were in the after-school care program. I was in the middle of a board meeting when my assistant knocked apologetically. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but your husband is here with what he's calling a situation." The board members chuckled. They were used to my family interrupting occasionally. It was part of the company culture I'd built. Family came first, always. Callister walked in, carrying a squirming golden retriever puppy. Ivy and Julian trailed behind him, looking guilty and hopeful in equal measure. "So," he said, not even trying to hide his grin, "remember when we said we'd talk about getting a dog?" I looked at the puppy, adorable, fluffy, clearly already theirs, regardless of what I said. "What's the puppy's name?" "Contract," Julian announced proudly. I burst out laughing. "You named the dog Contract?" "Ivy's idea," Callister said. "It's because that's how you and Daddy started." Ivy explained with the enthusiasm of a child who thought she was very clever. "You had a contract, and then you fell in love, and now Contract is part of our family too." The entire board was trying not to laugh. "Fine, but you're in charge of house training," I said to Callister. "Deal." As my chaotic, beautiful family left, puppy, children, husband creating a wake of happy noise, I looked at the framed Forbes cover on my wall. The woman in that photo had been building an empire from heartbreak, proving she didn't need anyone. The woman I was now had built something better. A family, messy, imperfect, absolutely real. The contract had been temporary, but the love was forever. Sometimes broken things heal stronger than they were before. Sometimes second chances matter more than first impressions. Sometimes the greatest love stories start with the worst beginnings. This was our modern fairy tale. Not the version where everything was easy, but the version where love, real, chosen, fought for love, conquered all. The contract became a promise. The arrangement became a family. And the ending? The ending was just the beginning. They all lived happily ever after. And that's how a contract became the greatest love story ever told. If this moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who believes in second chances. Subscribe to Empire of Lies for more stories that prove love can survive anything, even our own mistakes. Drop a comment telling me your favorite moment from Amara and Callister's journey. Was it the flu crisis? The proposal on the beach? Or maybe the puppy named Contract? Thank you for going on this journey with me. Until next time, believe in your own fairy tale, because sometimes the best love stories are the ones we almost didn't get to live.